So just to make sure you have joined the correct session, this is the Prognosis Denali Upgrade Practice Management webinar, and this is the second part. We are conducting the billing piece of the upgrade in two sections. In today's session, what we're going to take a look at is some general labeling and nomenclature changes that is at a system level, as well as the billing related changes. In our other session, we looked at payment changes and statement. Today we're going to look at the billing side, the customization of reports and your AR follow-up screens, and then we're also going to look at our brand new employer billing workflow. So to get started, we're going to look at some general changes to the user interface, and this is just label changes, not logic. We also cover this specific change in our EMR sessions if you happen to be attending both. This is a label change on the home page, and both here in the billing side as well as on the EMR side, the home page displays the status of your patient throughout their visit. Previously, the label was simply called status, so we have modified that to now say visit status, and within it, the term nurse has been replaced with clinical staff, and that is to coincide with the way user profiles get generated in our system. Anybody has clinical access could have different titles. They may not be a nurse specifically. Previously, that was an older legacy term that had been hard-coded. We've now relaxed that hard coding so that it's more broad and just says clinical staff. So again, that is just a label change with regards to the routing of your patient through their visit. It is reflected here on your billing side as well. Now, getting specifically into claim-related changes on the billing side. When it comes to creating a new claim in your billing module, meaning it does not auto-create from an EMR encounter. Previously, the encounter type would be blank, so you always had to choose one. Now, if you want to use an existing encounter type for your internal statistical purposes, of course, you still want to do that through the pick list. However, as you see here now at the number 1, it will default to an encounter type DB, which stands for dummy bill. This is because you do need to have an encounter within the database structure in order to have a claim. But if you're doing it strictly for billing purposes and there is no need to reflect it back on the EMR side, then there's no reason to have a valid encounter type. So now when you do create new in the billing side direct without an EMR encounter, it will default to the non-EMR claim, and then you can still change it if you need to. Now, this non-EMR claim, dummy bill encounter type, is applicable both for professional and institutional. When you're using your specific encounter types that are defined, those of course need to have the appropriate claim type defined within it. So that is one thing to just keep in mind for those of you who may do both institutional and professional billing. The specific encounter types do need to be defined specifically for institutional or professional. But in the dummy claim scenario, which is now the default, you do not need to worry about that designation. If you need to create institutional, of course, on the screen, you would still need to click the UB04 checkbox there in the upper right. Also related to the encounter type level and claim creation, there is now the ability of creating claims for zero duration encounters. And these will auto-generate. So on the EMR side, again, or even on the billing side, if you're selecting a valid encounter type and it has a zero duration. Typically on the EMR side, in case you're not aware, encounter types have to have a duration of greater than 0 in order to create an appointment. Otherwise, it is not considered valid. It creates the encounter, but nobody can see it. And it also did not create the claim. So there are scenarios, such as in the case of internal lab billing or radiology billing and whatnot, where the client needs the encounter type, but they're not scheduling appointments for it, so there's really no reason to put a duration. So they do create it as zero duration. So those will now still allow you to auto-create a claim. The exceptions would be your system level zero duration encounters, or those that do not already require a visit, such as your prescription refills. So these second and third bullet points on the slide are just informational. Usually you don't visually see these encounter types, but if you do for whatever reason, these are not subject to create claims. Any other encounter type with a zero duration, however, does now have the ability of creating a claim. Typically, if you notice the notation up there on the first bullet point, this is in conjunction with HL7 interfaces, such as for lab billing, when your claim type is client, and you need to therefore create a claim for the lab in that scenario, but you're not scheduling appointments for it. So this may not even be applicable in your practice, but if it is, this is now a new feature. Also, with regards to creating claims from the EMR side, when it comes to the situation where your governmental payers require a CPT or HCPT code that may be different or unique from the non-governmental payers, in the existing feature, we've always done it at the encounter type level. So when the encounter type was set up, you had the option of flagging it as Medicare, meaning governmental. And then based on the requirement, it would choose that particular CPT or HCPT code when it created the claim. Well, we've expanded the logic now to the claim filing code, meaning if you have a default insurance, it's going to read the insurance claim filing indicator instead of the encounter type. Now, if you're talking about a self-pay claim or a claim that you just have not entered insurance on yet, then it's still going to read the flag at the encounter type level. For those of you on the billing side who are not currently using this feature at the encounter type level, you may have created a claim scrubber, or you may have a crossover code table created on the billing side in order to map the correct CPT code in this scenario. That logic will still function, so you do not need to make a change with this feature unless you so desire to. So if those crossovers and scrubbers will still work. But if you would like to modify it, then using the claim filing indicator now, instead of the encounter type flag, your claim will auto-generate with the correct code based on the payer, if that in fact is a scenario in your practice. Now going out to the claim page level, a couple of label changes on the I button, and this is displaying data only, so there's no functional data entry here. But if you notice at the bottom of the I button, we have added now the claim creation date as well as the encounter close date. And those will reflect the most recent dates. So if you're on a claim that has been reopened and rebilled, it's not going to be the original creation date, it is the most recent creation date, or the most recent time that that encounter has been closed. Sometimes those dates are needed based on what you're doing up above in the specific fields, and that is why now we've added it here for convenience sake, so you don't have to close this button, go verify what those dates are from the EMR side, and then come back in. The ability to access the EMR Encounter from the billing side has been expanded now. Previously, we had added the stethoscope icon only to the patient account screen. So when you were on the patient account, you were able to directly open the EMR Encounter without toggling into EMR and requiring EMR permissions on your user profile. Well, we've added that stethoscope icon now to a few other places on the billing side, including your claim details screen, as you see here at the top. So you will now see the stethoscope icon after you get the Denali upgrade on every claim page. You've also got it at a menu level for your claims processed, AR follow-up outstanding, and on the assigned task screen. So those are the most common places when you sometimes need to toggle into the encounter for that claim to view the details. The benefit, of course, here is that you will be able to use the back button to get back to your claim in a single step instead of having to go back to billing and research for your claim. So this eliminates a lot of additional mouse clicks and searches to get back to where you were. And again, it also means that as a biller, you do not require specific EMR permissions for this. You can view it directly from your billing permissions. Another change that we have added, now this is a new function on the claim page, is a denials button. So if you notice there in the top screen capture next to the number 1, there's a new gray button with the label denials right above the charge row. This reflects at a patient level their denial history from the patient accounts. So it's patient specific, but it is cumulative of that patient's history within prognosis of any claim that has previously been denied. It is reflected here, as you see in the second screen capture, in a pop-up table. This is informational only, so there's no data entry or interactivity here, but it does give you, in descending order, every claim that has had a denial for this patient. This is a valuable feature for you as a biller when you're working a new claim, because you can review any kind of denial trend in the past to make sure it doesn't get repeated with the new claim. So you're able to perhaps circumvent any potential denial up front. An enhancement to your claim letter functionality. When you are clicking the claim letter icon on a claim and you want to send a letter with or without attachments, in the upper left where you address who you want to send the letter to, this has been enhanced to include now employer level, case management level, as well as collection agency level contacts. So you do not have to manually address those values if, of course, that particular entity is associated to your patient under patient register. So that would mean your employer master needs to have the email and fax. Case management needs to be referencing the employer or the adjuster or the attorney out of the appropriate vendor master. And within those vendor masters, you need to have the appropriate details and so on. Also, if you notice the number 2, you have the ability of sequencing your attachments. So if you have more than 4 attachments for this letter and you would like them to go in a specific sequence, you can sequence them by clicking that icon. And in the case where there's more than 4, you will have the paperclip icon enabled because they will then display in this little pop-up. If you notice back in this screenshot, you have 4 icons. It can only screen real estate-wise because this claim letter is a pop-up. It's a static size. That is why if you have attached more than 4 and you need access to them, the paperclip gives you an additional pop-up with those additional attachment icons. So that is 2 new features and an additional icon within the letter pop-up. Now also at the claim level, some enhancements behind the scenes, so this isn't visual to you. You now have the ability on IPA claims or capitated claims to add a secondary or a tertiary payer. Previously, you had only the primary capitated payer and then the balance was written off. And we've learned in different scenarios and different payer situations that you are able to bill a secondary or a tertiary payer in certain circumstances. So we're giving you the ability now to add those additional payers. Along with that, there's new properties to accommodate these specific services that are billable in those scenarios. So you see here the 3 bulleted points in blue. There's some new properties that you can define, CPT codes that are not to be automatically written off after that capitated payment comes in, or the number of days to be excluded before the write-off occurs. And you can also do that for your IPA payers if that is applicable in your practice. So it would be a combination now of defining the specific service codes in these properties, as well as adding the secondary and tertiary payer beyond the capitated payer. And then the automated write-off that occurs through the scheduled process is going to read these properties, and those particular codes would not be written off. But if there's other codes present that were not paid through the capitated payer, and you have not defined it in these properties, those will still be automatically written off when that scheduled process runs. So you will still have the workflow of a capitation receipt and a capitation write-off, but these would be exceptions that you're able to define locally. The claim process screen, you see here in the lower right outlined in pink what it looks like now. When you go under the claims menu, processed has a sub-menu that you can do at either claim level or charge level. That sub-menu is gone, so you now have just the processed option. And if you see at the top here where my Denali bubble is pointing, you have a pick list where you will choose claim level or charge level. So you still have the flexibility of running your processed report at a claim level or at a CPT HCPC level based on your desire. The benefit here is you can set your filters one time and then toggle back and forth between claim view or CPT level view. So that makes it convenient for you from not having to refresh your filters. You can toggle back and forth. Other claim-related changes with regards to the insurance eligibility module. Now this feature was actually released a while back in a patch in your current version. So this is not a new feature. You've already got this now without waiting for the upgrade. But we were not doing webinars, so nobody really learned about it. So we are just letting you know that you do have the option, if you weren't already aware, that with regards to insurance eligibility, we now have an automated payment register demographic update piece so that when eligibility is verified, if the insurance company returns details different than what you have in prognosis, meaning different address, different phone numbers, dates of birth, whatever, you can update prognosis automatically based on what the insurance has. That requires setup, there's properties involved and whatnot, and there are separate videos for this on the Resource Center if you would like more information on that. There's new validation edits to prevent a user from deleting a CPT or HCPC that has been referenced somewhere. There's also validation now at the claim level for not otherwise classified codes like your 99s to include commercial insurances. Previously, that edit was only on governmental payers. So it will now edit any claim that has an NOC code that requires you to enter comments. There's some new scrubber check operands that have been added to accommodate case management fields and the new employer billing values. And there's also some new billing filter options added. So those are the general system-wide claim-related changes or nomenclature label changes. Now we're going to look at the enhanced feature of employer billing. This is actually now a complete workflow. For those of you who may do employer billing, we've had different pieces of it, but not a complete accounts receivable workflow from billing through collection, through write-offs, adjustments, and so on. So if you're using it already, this is an enhanced feature. If you're not using it yet, this is a new feature in case you're interested. Employer billing was primarily developed for occupational medicine providers or our specialties who provide employee health. New employee drug screening and things of that nature. It's where you bill the employer instead of the insurance. So it's not a self-pay, it's not an insurance, but it is a claim. And so you need to create an invoice, and in this case it goes to the employer. So this does require setup under configuration, both at the encounter type level as well as at the employer level. So employers are considered vendors in this case. The claim level impact is employers may have custom fee schedules, which would be defined at the employer level under the employer master. As a biller, you physically work the claim the same way you do an insurance claim, meaning there can be claim scrubber checks, you can look for all the accuracy, you still flag it as ready to send. So we've now incorporated scrubber checks at the employer level where previously they were excluded. Employer invoices can be printed either at an employer level or at a claim level. So on the employer invoice screen, there have been some modifications there with the addition of some columns and fields added. And now once the invoice is generated, it can be printed or it can be emailed. So emailing has been added along with encryption based on the employer master. You would need to have their tax ID defined. There's a provision then if you're going to email the employer invoices or once they've been generated for you to get an FYI message in your prognosis communication. The search screens have been modified to incorporate new columns, and also there is now an employer portal available for employers to access their PHI. Now portals are now handled in a separate webinar session. So we're not going to look at the employer portal in today's session, but if you do employer billing and you have interest in the employer portal, that is included in our portals and apps upgrade session. So first of all, the setup required, and this typically is going to occur in EMR. At the encounter type level, employer billing does require its own encounter types. So if you keep track currently, new patient, follow-up patient, procedure patient, and you need to have employer billing in the workflow, you now need to have a new employer patient, an existing employer patient, and so on. And the reason for that is because on the billing side, if you notice here outlined in blue, your claim type does need to specify employer claim. That is to ensure that the appropriate workflow gets triggered. So it does start at the encounter type level. Also, underneath your vendors, there's an employer master. During registration, your registrars need to be sure they choose the employer out of the master file search, meaning use the binocular. Now, if you already do workman's comp billing, we have always had that logic for workman's comp to trigger that workflow. So this is the same workflow logic as you have in workman's comp, meaning you cannot free text in the employer on the patient register screen. Mechanically, the system allows your user to do that. But if they do not read it out of the master file, it will not trigger the appropriate workflow. Federal tax ID will be mandatory when you define your employers. This is also what you're looking at here is the employer master screen. You can define a custom fee schedule if needed. It will default to usual and customary unless the employer has negotiated a custom fee schedule with you. And the invoice template can be generated either at an invoice at the encounter type level or at the job level. Then if you want to send it by email, you have a checkbox there indicated by the number 5 that the employer wants their invoices emailed. That would require also that you have a valid email address in your employer master. And if the employer utilizes third-party administrators, at the employer level here, if you notice the number 7, there is an employer TPA button. That TPA button actually reads the TPA Master, which is on our next slide. But then also the number 8 button here points to the employer account screen. So TPA Master, if you use that, first of all, you would define those third-party administrators and the applicable details in the employer TPA Master. And then at the employer level, you would come in here to the TPA button and associate it. Now the account screen is very similar in functionality as your patient account screen, but it's at the employer level. So when you go into the employer master and you execute that ellipsis icon to click open the account screen, it's going to visually appear very similar to your patient account screen, but it's specific to the employer. So you're going to have their AR summarized here, their aging, their invoices, and so on. This is customizable, as well as you're going to see towards the end of our session, your account screen for patients is also customizable. So if this is what you're going to get out of the box if you do employer billing, but if you want to customize it, you can contact technical support to do so. So continuing now with the enhancement of this workflow, that is the setup for employer billing. On the employer or on the details, your claim page, 3 points of notice here to differentiate an employer claim from a self-pay or from an insurance. And number 1 may visually be a little confusing to you because it is identified as self-pay hyphen employer. So it is going to be treated as an employer claim in this case. If you notice the number 2 and the number 3, your employer name will display in red, and then the bill to employer checkbox will be selected. Those are the triggers that will come off of that encounter type having claim type employer. The reason it is saying self-pay here and then dash employer is because the insurance is a required field in the database. But in the case of the employer, you're not billing an insurance company. And in our claim creation logic, we either look for is there an insurance or is it self-pay. So that is the only 2 choices initially in claim creation. But now when that employer checkbox is indicated, it's going to add in here behind the self-pay dash employer because that tells the system do not apply insurance logic, do not imply self-pay logic, imply the employer logic. And that is going to, instead of creating a CMS 1500 or an EDI claim as it would for the insurance or self-pay, it's going to generate an invoice. So then when it comes time to sending the claims, you're going to generate the employer invoice instead of an EDI or a paper CMS 1500. And within this invoice screen, you can select the template. Now, we saw back in the employer master, you define the default template, but of course you can override it here. And that template is going to automatically compile based on the fee schedule, based on TPA and other criteria, the appropriate details. Now, for those of you already using employer billing, the number 3 item here on the slide is what is new with the upgrade. Previously, you were not able to delete invoices, and you now have that ability. Provided the invoice has never been billed and there's never been a payment applied against it, you're able to now delete it. Enhancements to the employer receipt screen now includes the advance function. In our first session, if you happen to attend it, we talked about the advanced utilization for payments, patient payments at the source level. We've also got it for the employer. So when an employer invoice comes in, if the employer happens to overpay, that money can go into the employer level credit, and then it can be tracked through the utilization. Now, there is pagination here. If you notice at the bottom, there's a property. This property also applies to insurance remittances, where you can decide the number of invoices that will list per claim. If you notice in my screen example, I've only got 5, so you don't notice that it's scrollable. But if you visually think in your mind of your EOB screen, in the current version, you're only allowed to have 4 claims. In the new version, as we covered in our session number 1, you can now have up to 15 in the new accordion. You can have that same up to 15 here. And then if there was more than 15, you would end up having a page number. So in other words, your employer receipt is applying the same logic as insurance receipt. When there is a remaining amount, the hyperlink allows you to move it into the advance. So you can enter your remark as to why you're moving that credit into advance and why you did not fully allocate that remittance yet. And then that activates your allocate advance hyperlink. And when you go into the allocate advance hyperlink in this new advanced utilization line, you'll be able to choose other claims for that employer to apply the money against. And this screen, as far as allocating the advance, is just like your patient advance that we covered in the first session. It's been designed so that the credit is on the top and then all available claims are at the bottom to move the money against. Also part of this enhancement for employer workflow is the ability to do write-offs and refunds. So if you don't want to apply the money through that allocation tracking on another claim, you also can go ahead now and create an employer refund or do a write-off. So that those features are not currently there for the employer workflow. So now moving out of that specific workflow, we're going to go back to system level changes on the AR follow-up side. You now have the ability of customizing the user interface for your assigned task screen, outstanding claims, or patient account. Now, when you get the Denali upgrade, these three screens will be the default, which is what's included here in the webinar, prior to any customizations occurring. With regards to the assigned tasks, there are 17 standard columns. And of course, not all 17 can visually fit on the screen, so there's the scroll bar that you navigate right or left to view all your columns. Well, this layout is now customizable. It is at the system level, so that is one limitation you want to keep in mind. It's not user specific. But once you customize it, you can rearrange these columns. You can remove columns that you don't want, change the column width, and so on, so that when the screen does load, it's a little more usable for how you want to use the screen. It consists of properties in order to customize this. Now, these properties are available to you, so if you have a comfort level with making modifications, you can certainly do so on your own. However, we do encourage you to contact technical support for assistance, because if you do make any mistakes, it could cause the screen to quit working altogether, and then all of a sudden you won't be able to see any data. So that's up to you. You do have the ability of customizing it on your own. The property does have help. As you see here, the different properties that are available, you can define the column width, the number of fields, the name of the field if you want to change the label, and so on, as well as their position on the screen. Same rules apply to outstanding claims. You also have the same 17 standard columns, but you can resequence them, hide the ones you don't want, and so forth. Now, these are different properties. So it's the same logic. You maneuver it the same way. It's just different properties because it's a different screen. So if you wanted the same changes on both screens, you do need to make them in both places. And of course, again, you could contact technical support to assist you. And then thirdly, the patient account screen. Now, before we get to the customizing here, there's some other changes on the patient account screen overall. Some label changes. Guarantor is now the standard system-wide, both billing and EMR. Previously, we had changed it on some screens, but it still said responsible person here. So it now says Guarantor for consistency. The document list from EMR is now available. Previously, that was only there for you when you went into the claim letter. If you needed to attach anything to a letter, you now have it available to you here at the account level. So you don't have to have EMR permissions to toggle into EMR. You can just simply look at the documents here at the account level. We've also added the case number if you use case management in your practice. And there's now a totals row on the activity table. Now, with regards to the layout, it is also customizable. Now, there's two properties involved here with customizing it. The account sections, there's new tables defined, which I'm going to get to on the next slide. You also, in that first property mentioned underneath my screen capture, you can now hide columns if they're not applicable in your practice. So, for instance, if we come up here and look at your claim table, which is underneath the number 2. I'm talking about the blue, green, yellow columns where you have primary, secondary, tertiary, you have employer balance, patient balance, collection agency balance. Well, that, of course, to have all of those different columns reduces your screen real estate. Some people would rather have wider columns because maybe you don't do collection agency handoff. Maybe you don't do employer billing or tertiary billing. So you can now hide those columns to increase your screen width if you so desire. Now, what you look at on this account screen really consists of a bunch of tables that are embedded. And by tables, I basically mean Excel spreadsheets or tabular reports. So the customization now involves new tables that we're creating and automatically providing in the upgrade. But you also can customize, meaning create a custom report. So if there's something that is not part of our standard, we have the ability of fetching reports. And you can create custom reports, both at a tabular level or at a billing collection level. So you got a lot of new flexibility now. An example here, if you notice number 1, on your current patient account screen, you have remittances, recoups, patient receipts, patient returns, all lumped together in a single table. But if you notice number 2, you now have the ability of putting them into separate tables. So if it's easier on your eye when you're researching and troubleshooting, and you don't like having them all lumped together in a single table based on remittance type, you can now put them in separate tables. That's just one example of how you can use this, because sometimes it's a little confusing when you're trying to differentiate, was this an insurance payment, was this a patient payment? You can do so by looking at the document number prefix, but again, some people want it a little more segregated, so that is what this functionality allows. And then here's an example of hiding the columns and how the screen real estate changes. If you wanted to hide the employer column or the collection agency column, for instance. Now, getting back to that new addition of the EMR documents on your account screen. If you're familiar with the document list in EMR, that is what is launching, but that has also been modified with the new upgrade, both on the EMR side as well as here on the billing side when you open it through your pop-up. There is also a limitation to you. When you open it here on the billing side through the patient account pop-up button, you only have read access. Now, read access does also allow you to print. So if you need to look at the document and also print it, you have that ability. But what is limited is the action buttons are grayed out. Just above my little blue bubble that says limited functionality, view and filtering only is what you have available. You cannot generate a PDF or a zip file of these documents. That you would still have to go to EMR to perform. But you do have the option of filtering your documents as well as viewing an individual document. And when you're viewing the individual document, you have the ability of printing it. Now, part of the upgrade, both EMR as well as here, is the ability of sharing a document on a portal. We now support 3 different portals: patient, referring doctor, and employer, if you do employer billing. And a document can be shared on 1, both 2, or all 3 of those. So if you have the appropriate user role, you can share these documents by clicking on it, this new icon, and then switching on or off for that document. Next feature now, moving out of the patient level and going back to system level, we have modified our reports and our graphs. There is now a new single screen user interface for both. This provides more speed and efficiency in generating the data, as well as giving you the improved customization at a report level of being able to regenerate with new data filters without having to go back out and recreate the entire report. Excuse me. First of all, though, a couple of other changes just label-wise to different reports. Your aging. There's some label changes on the patient aging. It simply has now gone from non-statement or statement to not suppressed, suppressed. That is not changing the logic. The function remains intact. It's a label change. If you're an older client, prior to us adapting the collection agency workflow, financial class was used for collections to suppress statements. And that is where that verbiage came from. But now for clients that are coming into Prognosis's life now, who is learning with the collection agency workflow, they can actually use financial codes for different reasons. So that is why the label has been changed. We've also added the run-in background option because aging reports often take a long time to generate. and it would hose your machine up, meaning you could not use it for any other purpose until the report finished. So now if you click that box to run in the background, it will go ahead and start generating the report in the background and allow you to go ahead and keep using your computer. And that's applicable on all of the different aging tabs. When we get to insurance aging, there's another option now added called insurance responsibility. So you can get it for primary only, secondary only, tertiary only, or the default of all. And employer aging, if you use the employer workflow, has got some label changes to the queries involved if you want to do it at a claim level or a charge detail level. Now with regards to tabular reports, and this content is also covered in our EMR webinar because tabular reports and EMR and billing are now the same as far as the single screen user interface. So if you've already attended EMR, you have heard the next few minutes, or if you're going to attend EMR, you will get this again. But here on the billing side, specifically dealing with tabular reports, you now have a single screen user interface, meaning you have your property, your parameters at the top, the generated output below, and you can refresh and regenerate that output however you want by modifying your parameters. In the existing world, it's a lot more cumbersome because you have 3 independent windows. So you have to first select your report query, then define your parameters in a secondary pop-up, and then the third pop-up gives you the data. And if you want to refresh the parameters, you have to start all over again. So by condensing these 3 into a single screen, you get a great deal of efficiency. So dissecting that tabular report user interface, the top portion where you see my number 1, 2, and 3 is choosing the report. Now, this is not a logical change. This is just a presentation change, but you have the ability of creating not custom reports, but a custom report library or catalog, reports you frequently use. When you generate it, you can save it, and then My Reports would be the default. If you have never saved a report, then it defaults to all. Classification defaults to all unless you have reclassified the reports and saved them as My, then it would default only to the classifications within your custom report catalog. And then the reports that are available are going to be based on those first 2 criteria. So it filters it down from either My Report or All, the classification under each of those categories, and then the reports for each of those classifications. Then the next level of filters, number 4, you can freeze columns, meaning when you generate the output, if there's a large number of data columns you need to scroll through, you can freeze. Just like in Excel, you're able to freeze a pane. Maybe you want the claim number or the insurance name or something to stay frozen. As you scroll through the other fields, you can do that by specifying before you generate the report how many columns you want to freeze. Number 5 and number 8 I take together. Number 5 allows you to specify your date range. Number 8 allows you to indicate a number of days instead of a date range. So the date range and the day provision can be customized at an individual report level as to whether or not it is available or applicable. Typically, by default, when you go into your date range, you can say today, this week, this month, this year, last month, last week, last year, define a custom date range. You can now restrict it at design view if all of those options are available or not. You also can stipulate whether the user should just be able to specify a number of days. Maybe you want to run the report for the last 90 days or the last 100 days, and you don't want to count on your calendar. October 27 minus 90 takes me back to July 28th. You just want to say 90. That's the benefit of having the days field. Number 6 is your applicable title, and that along with number 7 allows you to customize the conditions. Applicable title, when it's displayed as you see here next to number 6, means there's no conditions associated. It's just going to be date driven. But the applicable title allows you, maybe you've got the report based on payer. or based on encounter type, based on doctor, based on CPT range, whatever, then this would be enabled. The label would be accordingly, payer, CPT code, doctor, and then the binocular would open up that master file so you could choose the CPT range or the insurance company. Number 7 works the same way, but it doesn't have to be customized into the query. It's always available as a filter. If you're a single doctor office, it automatically defaults to all, which is that one doctor. If you have multiple doctors, it will still default to all, but the pick list will be enabled so you can choose an individual one. And then those far right options, number 9, hide identifier. This would be for PHI. Maybe when you're viewing it on the screen, you want the PHI. You need to know the patient name or their social. So you would not hide it. So you would leave it deselected as in this screen example. But if you want to then produce the report, physically print it to share, you might want to hide those details if you're sharing it outside of your practice. So before generating it, you would say hide identifier. 10 allows you to apply patient or billing filters. So those options would bring a pop-up that you could choose specifically what filter you want to apply. Sort, you decide if you want to sort in ascending or descending up to 3 columns so that the output is sorted the way you want to visually view it. And then number 12 is the comment box. Programming by default would put a standard description as to what the report is about. You can add to that or modify it if you so desire. So maybe you've decided based on a report in your practice what its value is. Is it end of month? Is it end of productivity standards? Whatever. You can add that as a comment so it's very easy for new staff to learn what report to use when. And you can even have it print on the report if you need it to. And this screen is just included FYI. If you're going to, again, customize your reports on your own, if you have that level of comfort, we do, again, encourage you to contact technical support before you make these changes because you could make a report completely break. But this screen has also been redesigned to accommodate these new changes. So in case you do the configuring on your own, we're including this screen to let you know it also has been changed. Now, similarly, that user interface logic has been applied to graphs. So you have the same split single screen solution with parameters on the top, output on the bottom. You can refresh your parameters and it regenerates the output in that same screen, whereas now you have separate screens that you have to go out and reselect the graph, recompile the data. Now, we briefly talked about graphs in our first billing session in conjunction with the dashboard, where you can now have graphs displayed on your dashboard. This is going one step further because you can have the graphs at a external to the dashboard at a system level, print it, share it, whatever. But it does have the same 20 predefined key performance index graphs included with the upgrade. And you have the ability of classifying these just like you do on the reports. The output then is enhanced as far as if you are going to print it or if you just want to view it on the screen, you can hover over to enlarge an area, get the tooltip pop up to tell you the detail that you're viewing. You can modify the graph type. If it originally comes as you see here in a bar graph, but you want to see the same data in a pie chart, you can change the graph type. And then it regenerates in real time. You can specify in the Graph Design Master the labels, the numbers, the label itself as far as what it's called, as well as the color. And you can stipulate the specific type of graph by default. And again, regardless of the default, you can change it at runtime to one of the others. Now, also at the system report level, there is a new report called Trend under the Management Report choice. So in your existing Management Report menu, this is where the dashboard option used to exist, but that dashboard was never really utilized the way we've presented it now in the upgrade. So we've removed it from the management report since, as we talked about in session 1, we've turned it into a system level icon, and we've replaced it now with this trend report option. Trending is a new level of management reports that's based on scheduled processes that automatically run in the background for the sake of you getting data sets to compare for trending purposes. And it creates both a tabular format with data as well as graphical in your output. So regardless of if you want the data or the visual, you get both. You do have the ability of creating custom layouts if you so desire, but the system's going to come preloaded with a couple of standard trends at an aging level, at a build level, and so on. This is showing you the customization window. Very similar, it's the same user interface, in fact, to the ability that you've already got of creating custom reports. You can do that with your trends now as well. And then the setup, now this is going to be hard-coded when you get the upgrade. So this screen is being presented informationally. Your trends are set to run every Sunday at midnight Pacific time for weekly calculations, and every last day of the month at midnight Pacific time for monthly calculations. And again, this is just automatic once the upgrade exists in your practice. So you don't need to worry about it. It's just going to calculate the data in the background so that if you run the report, you can get it. Okay, so that is the extent of the enhancement changes. Now, just generally speaking, the upgrade, you will be notified 7 days out when the upgrade is going to be scheduled to release to your practice. When you enter your user ID and password, this pop-up occurs to inform you. If you do have any questions, of course, you can contact technical support either through the support chat on the Resource Center or by phoning them. I do not have any kind of timeline access, so I don't know who gets upgraded when. We are upgrading dozens of clients every day. When you get the upgrade, the new features will be highlighted by these pop-ups. The pop-ups are there for your convenience, just to FYI, this is new. You can ignore it. You can hide it. That would be for that session only, and it would reappear the next time you come into the same screen. If you say, don't show me again, you're never going to see it again. Currently, we do not have any videos embedded, but once the videos become available, there may also be a third hyperlink in here that says click to play the video. And with all of our releases, you get that new bubble at the top for 30 days that gives you access to the detailed release notes. I believe the billing release notes this time are about 250 pages. I've only given you about 45 PowerPoint slides here. So obviously there's a lot more detail in the release notes if you need to read those. Our release notes are always part of the online help. If you see that here behind the green bubble, we now are presenting them in 3 modules: EMR in the turquoise, billing in the purple, and portals in the orange. So that is the second session here. Are there any questions from those of you who are present? If so, you can click the raise hand icon on your toolbar and I can unmute you. Otherwise, I bid you a good week. What's left of it. All right, I'm not seeing any hands go up, so I'm assuming that you're all good to go. So you all have a pleasant rest of your day, and let us know if you need anything. Thank you.